The chalice will now be lit in the sanctuary. If you have your own chalice, please light it now too, and let us know that you've done so by typing in the chat. This morning's chalice lighting words are from Isabel Wilkerson in her book, Caste. In her highly researched book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, Isabel Wilkerson describes caste systems in America. She describes caste as a link between America's abduction and selling slaves to modern white supremacy. It is the backdrop to the racism we address in the UUA's 8th principle. In a world without caste, being male or female, light or dark, immigrant or native born, would have no bearing on what anyone was perceived as being capable of. In a world without caste, we would all be invested in the well-being of others in our species, if only for our own survival, and recognize that we are in need of one another more than we have been led to believe. We would join forces with indigenous peoples all around the world, raising the alarm as fires rage and glaciers melt. We would see that when others suffer, the collective human body is set back from the progression of our species. A world without caste would set everyone free. Now please join me in saying our unison affirmation. The words will be shared on your screen. Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature, connect deeply and openly, and act for justice. Let us now bear witness to the joys and sorrows experienced in our communities. If you have a personally significant joy or sorrow, please type it into the chat and I will read it aloud. All right, I have a joy to start with. I have a joy of being with some of my closest friends down in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay area, and we're having a wonderful time. From Al. Skin cancer removed from left hand on Friday, still a bit sore. They told me to treat it with Aquaphor. Any other suggestions? From Chris, Megan, and Maggie Fenton to everyone. Joy, we got to drive to Ohio and visit family we had not seen in 2 years. From Susan McNamara, joy to be with Veterans for Peace friends in Baltimore. From Claire Freed, I am thrilled that Eddy is leading this sermon and also seeing my beautiful granddaughters with our son. From Karen Sue, my mother-in-law died on Wednesday. She was 95. We will miss her terribly. From John Igner. Joy, my daughter has moved into a first owned home. From Stephanie C. It is a joy to be here with Eddy and his spiritual family. We also acknowledge all the unspoken joys and sorrows held within the sanctuary of our hearts, and all those people who have yet to find a spiritual home where they can share their joys and sorrows.
On a service about racism, I couldn't think of a better way to start off than listening to a recent poem by Amanda Gorman. Let's hear it now.
Writing poetry is my favorite way to use my own voice. This is a poem I wrote called Talking Gets Us There. It's normal to notice what makes us different, because what makes us different is what makes each of us so special. There's beauty in every type of face and in every type of freckle. From the curl of your hair to the color of your skin, no one is exactly the same, not even twins. But across time and place, people have been treated unfairly just because of their race. So heroes get into good trouble. They have to struggle for a long while, but when they win, it's worth every mile. People of color still experience racism today. So it's up to all of us to say enough is enough, to speak out with all our hearts. And that starts at home. It starts with asking questions about race when we're taught about it. Together, I know we can tackle racism. But first, we have to talk about it.
Now we're going to have the hymn number 170. You will see it's a little different than usual. You will see the words on the screen. Please join us in singing this hymn and hear the interwoven reflections of members of our UUCHV Allies for Racial Equality.
Stand by, stand by.
We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
I'm gentle when I feel deep empathy for the oppressed people of this country who don't have the freedom and opportunity to enjoy life in the manner that I do. I'm angry when I learn of the inequities and injustices perpetrated by our own societal systems to privilege white people and disadvantage people of color. Compassion and anger fuel my motivation to work to be an anti-racist. When George Floyd was murdered by police last year, my journey began. I was afraid to march and rally because of the pandemic, so I started studying Black American history, Black writers on racism, literature on policing, and UUA writings and courses on anti-racism. I went to Surge, Race Talks, ARE, the Eighth Principle Project, the NAACP, the ACLU, Westchester Coalition on Police Reform, etc., all Zoom meetings. I listened to Black voices. The education is invaluable to me. It fuels my anger and compassion. I found that racism is worse than I thought, and it's not getting better nearly soon enough now, 150 years after slavery ended. People are suffering. Black people are living in a different reality than white people. What I did then was follow the advice of UUA Allies for Racial Equity, the Widening the Circle report, and the edicts of the Eighth Principle. I endeavored to partner with Black-led organizations, help in whatever way I could, build partnerships, and desegregate my life. Our social justice chair, Ginny, was in communication with individuals involved in the Ossining police reform effort and shared emails from a Black youth group organizer. He was trying to make the community aware of the inequities being perpetrated by the local government in their management of the police reform process. To my mind, this youth organizer was asking for help. I felt empathy and anger and jumped in. It was a lot of work, stress, and more educating myself on policing. I went to all Ossing's police reform meetings and spoke up, wrote letters to elected officials, and began a relationship with the Ossining youth group called NU Builds. Since then, they have invited me to be on 2 of their committees, the Good Trouble and the Green committees. I meet with them on Zoom every week, and I'm going to be giving welding lessons to kids in the future. I'm also working with the Hudson Valley Poor People's Campaign and gardening for local food pantries. This has been my path towards incorporating the 8th principle into my life so far. And with everything in life, everyone's path will be different, I know. I invite you to join me, ask me questions. It was daunting at first, but became an organically growing path, and the awards have been priceless. Thank you.
We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Good morning. My name is Tina Mayer. I've been a member of UUCHV since 2007. I joined in search of a spiritual home for myself and my family. At UUCHV, I've been involved with RE, music, and with the Sharing and Caring Committee. I've been involved with social justice since 2016, when I rudely realized that politicians weren't going to be taking care of our democracy. My political activism has tried to be responsive to what seemed to be making most sense in the moment. I started out working locally to help elect government officials who oppose gun shows at the county center and would talk to their constituents instead of avoiding them. The murder of George Floyd in May 2020 was another rude wake-up call for me, and I started trying to intentionally link my activism to racial justice. The coordination of our social justice UU the Vote organizers, Ginny Stillman and Daria Gregg and others, to work on combating voting suppression made this transition very easy. We began supporting the Center for Common Ground, a grassroots organization that reaches out to voters of color to encourage them to vote. Through the Center for Common Ground's Reclaim Our Vote campaign, we wrote postcards to Georgia advising people to check their voter registration status to make sure they hadn't been purged from the rolls. I phone banked to voters of color in North Carolina during election season, letting them know the dates of early voting, where their early voting places were, and advising them of what ID they needed to bring in order to successfully vote. During the Georgia runoff for Senators Warnock and Ossoff, I called to sign up volunteers in Georgia to go door to door to help voters whose absentee ballots may have been disqualified and to help those voters correct or cure their ballots. Right now, my current focus is on S1, or the For the People Act, which would pass a range of federal voter protection laws to bypass numerous state voter suppression laws targeted towards voters of color that are passing in Georgia, Texas, and other parts of the country. Senator Warnock has called S1 the infrastructure bill for democracy. I've been calling voters in West Virginia to ask them to call Senator Manchin to encourage him to support S1. Word from strategic organizers at End Citizens United is that Senator Manchin is in conversation with Senators Warnock, Klobuchar, and others to work on a version of S1 he can support. So it is important for him to keep hearing from voters in his state on the importance of S1. In our state, it is important for our senators to keep hearing about this as well. Therefore, I have two simple asks for you. The first is to call Senator Schumer's office in Peekskill at 914-734-1532, which I've put in the chat. Call every day if possible, asking him to do everything in his power as Senate Majority Leader to pass S1. Without federal voting protection laws, passing any other sort of legislation that promotes racial justice will be very difficult. In that vein, my second ask is that you recognize the importance of local, off-year elections and vote in every single one. While these elections don't get the newsprint or TV time of the major national races, these local elections determine what happens on the ground here in Westchester County in New York State. They drive many social justice issues, not only here, but serve as a model and catalyst for progressive efforts in other states. Thank you.
We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Good morning. When I first learned that we were considering adopting the eighth principle, I knew I had to do some deep learning so that I could work with our children on its introduction. I asked myself, am I woke enough to do this work? Like many UUs across the country, I felt pretty sure I wasn't a racist. Nope, not a racist body, no, not a racist bone in my body. In spite of that notion, I knew I had to do some self-reflective work in order to be a worthy teacher to our kids. So first, I joined the Tuesday morning Allies for Racial Equity group. There I learned that we were all at different phases of our learning. We are all at different stages of becoming woke. This was the start of my anti-racist journey. To raise anti-racist children, we know it starts with us as adults. First, we need to interrogate ourselves. There's no way we'll be competent teachers if we haven't first talked with ourselves. I learned that to be anti-racist, you have to sit with discomfort and place vulnerability over comfort. During this time of self-reflection, I came across a quote on Facebook. The words helped me understand my place in the system, my own participation in racism. And this was the quote. The only thing that should follow, quote, I'm not a racist, but, is this. I'm not a racist, but I do live in a system of institutionalized racism that I absorb and actively benefit from. Those words spoke to me. And so that's what I kept in my heart as I helped lead our kids this year in learning about the eighth principle. Here's the kids' wording of the eighth principle. We believe in building the beloved community, free of racism and oppression. If you came to RE Sunday this past May, you may remember the spinning wheel the kids created, which listed ways they can live out the eighth principle, ways we can all work together for racial justice. It's a living list that can and will be changed along the way. We centered Black voices through Black stories by Black authors, art and music by Black artists. Amanda Gorman was a big part of our programming, as we heard her poem with Talking Gets Us There as our launch pad. Some parents think their children are colorblind. However, data shows otherwise. As young as 3 months old, babies show a preference for members of their own racial groups. And we know that by 2 years of age, children are already consuming racist ideas. They're already discerning who to play with based on kids' skin color. So how do we unravel and challenge the racist ideas that form in our kids' minds? We must, for a start, have regular conversations with them about race and skin color. And why is talking about race so difficult? Partly because our parents didn't talk to us about it. Imagine if we were having conversations about racism since we were 2 years old. It would be so much easier for us to talk about it now. No matter what grade children are in, they should learn history through an anti-racist lens. Not only learning about the role of white supremacy and racism in history, but doing so in a way that empowers them to pursue social justice. If our teachings are successful, kids won't feel responsible for what happened in the past, but they will learn that they are responsible moving forward for what they do with whatever power they might have. What better education could there be? As I continue my self-reflective work, I have now become a part of the curriculum, the way that I show up, the way that I enter our space, my anti-racist identity deeply embedded in what I offer the children. The work is undoubtedly not easy, but through conversations about race, systemic racism, and ultimately love, we can empower our children to become authentic and engaged change makers. Thanks.
We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Community is a group of people united by a common interest. Beloved community, as used by Martin Luther King and now by Unitarian Universalists, is a special kind of community. It is one where all kinds of people come together, and within that community there is some combination of love, mutual respect, and care for justice. Let me share a regret. 2 choices in my life in which I walked away from attempts to start beloved community. In college, I never once went over with my dinner tray and sat at the table with the Black students. And then early in my career, I joined the New York business world where I was expected to conform, and I did. Not only did I embrace being white, Euro-American, college and grad school educated, upper middle class, athletic, definitely not disabled, and cisgender, I actually tamped down my femaleness in order to be successful in the business community. I turned this pattern around after I got foster kids. I purposely broke some rules and got to know the birth parents, and that led to me getting to know birth aunts, uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents, and friends. I sort of created a beloved community. Today, our holiday dinners and our birthdays have a variety of races, ethnicities, education levels, and classes. The past year, just after my divorce, one of them has been my rock in calling to check up on me and discuss my emotional state and my worry about my kids. It doesn't matter that she didn't finish high school. It doesn't matter that she grew up in the projects and still lives in the projects and was a substance abuser for 10 to 15 years of her life. Most importantly, though, now I try to get out there and open myself to communities where white society has insidiously taught me that I don't belong. I want to work on social justice efforts so people like me aren't the only ones who get to share in economic success. Join the effort in your own way. Where does your energy lead you? Lean into, lean into the budding beloved community you are already part of through your job and hobbies. Attend some Zoom or in-person meetings where people aren't white or upper middle class. Frequent stores, libraries, wherever where people aren't white or upper middle class. Join such social justice groups. They are usually diverse and impassioned. Most of us in our little UUCHV anti-racism group have done this and created new relationships that may lead to a beloved community. Thank you.
We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
We are gay and straight, cis and trans, queer and unqueer together. What does it mean to be together? If we dig in deep, the truth of togetherness, there is much value and meaning to be taken from that concept, but so often it acts as a buzzword, something along the lines of tolerance, a mere description of proximity. We are together in the same space or community, but for the marginalized, this version of togetherness functions as the supremacy of the hegemony. The dominant group decides how the community behaves, its social mores, and more often than not, it leaves the marginalized behind in defense and deference to its comfort and traditions. As a white, transgender, and autistic person, I was able to use my experiences to imagine a little bit of what it means when Black people describe their experiences with the genteel, banal white supremacy of our daily lives and our liberal institutions. I am also aware that so many white, transgender, and autistic people use their marginalized status as a shield against criticism when we perpetuate those same harmful systems. I can imagine, but I cannot know what life is like as a Black person. I can say I stand together with my Black comrades, but when I say that, do I really mean it, free of hypocrisy? My search to find a more genuine anti-racist practice started after I left my abuser in 2017. My experiences with him made me understand more clearly the systems and mechanisms of power that flow through human society. And it became almost immediately clear to me that white supremacy is the most acute manifestation of those systems in the world today. I was and am disabled, and I often find it difficult to read books or stay active in organizations. So to learn, I took to the internet and filled my social media feeds with Black and Indigenous thinkers who challenged my preconceptions. I have learned so much from these luminaries. One of the most important lessons was, in order to truly stand together with those who are marginalized, we must pay the most attention to who is not in the room. Have they been alienated from that space? Do they lack the means to actively participate in that space? I noticed that today, while we are speaking about racial justice, our lineup is a lot of white people. So how can we address these issues of who isn't here today, who isn't speaking with us? Much of that redress comes in the form of material and monetary redistribution. You need not join an organization or read lots of theory to donate to a Black trans disabled person's GoFundMe page. Donate a lot. Give enough that it hurts a little. Don't do it through a charity. Do it directly, every day if you can. Are you meaningfully standing together with people whose marginalized identities you do not share? Or are you merely in proximity to them? These are the challenges I must issue to myself if I am to call myself an accomplice in the fight for racial and systemic justice.
We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
We are a gentle, angry, justice-seeking people in a land of many colors. We are young and old, gay and straight, gentle and loving. We are in pursuit of justice, fairness, and equity for all, with love, starting with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. As you feel this in your gut and in your heart, join us in the change that the eighth principle can guide us through. Join us on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock. And now, just a minute of silent meditation.
Our reading today is from Breathe by Imani Perry. Imani Perry saw her young sons entering a world of danger, of threat, of discord, a world where claims of truth are often distant from any objectivity. She charts a path through love and listening. She starts with a quote from Angel Coyote Williams, a Zen priest, a Black woman of Perry's generation. If we are willing to accept truth just as it comes, without trying to change it to suit our needs, we become free of the anxiety that comes from the urge to change and control. It does not mean that you know everything. Rather, it means that you may not know anything at all in a situation, but you may have become so open to the infinite possibilities that you can approach and accept anything, even pain. Perry continues to say that in a life of authorship and interpretation, analysis and architecture and deconstruction, Love is my cipher of choice. Through love, we try to find truth and give it to our young. Our young then fashion truth from their own living, and they teach us in the process. Witness the joy and the wound. Imagine and then create laughter and ideas and responsibility to one another. Find your tribe, the ones who speak your language, the people with whom you can share the interior illumination. Be wildly courageous in all of your being, all of your living. Not reckless, simply courageous. May all our lives remain in the thick of it.
We are a gentle, angry people. Gentle because you are family. Angry because every day people of color are hurt, offended, denied their rights, and so much more. Not just elsewhere, but everywhere. Here in liberal New York, Westchester County, in Ossining, Cortland, and Peekskill, in Hastings. Manifestations of white supremacy are commonplace. Can we stand by and let this hurt continue to happen? Can we passively await others to do the work? In late June, the UUCHV, our congregation, voted to adopt the 8th principle. Thank you. We have joined 117 other UU congregations across America who took a stand. Racial injustice cannot continue here or anywhere. We all ask, what is this 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism? Got to say, penetrating the intense 8th principle language challenges most. Our ARE group has assembled a great list of readings that can help those interested. This list is available to all by going to the UUCHV website at uuchudsonvalley.org. Slide down past the section labeled highlights, and under that, over to the left, is a section that says the 8th principle. Click the buttons, and you'll see what we put together. Briefly, we have 7 wonderful principles that some of you have been learning since childhood. These 7 principles include the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion, respect for the interdependence of all existence. Today, these 7 wonderful principles fall short. They do not acknowledge the unique challenge of our time: to learn about and to end racism. The 8th principle says that we, through love, will commit to address the systemic nature of the oppression of people of color in our society. Only a united effort will assure Blacks, Browns, and eventually all oppressed people to thrive here and all over America. What is the pain? Let me assure you that the members of our church's Allies for Racial Equity, what is the plan? That our UUA, our group here at Croton, are planning to get into this work for the following year. We can start with how we listen to others, especially to people of color. Imani Perry suggested if you're willing to accept the truth with an open mind, you do not need to know everything about racism. You may not know much at all in a given situation. Being open to the infinite possibilities allows you to accept the brutal truth, to begin to feel the pain of racism as it surrounds us. She went on to tell her sons, remember her book were letters to her sons. She continues to say that hearing the truth and speaking the truth And being open to the pain opens the door to sharing the joy of this work. Joy from the camaraderie and the partnership with all those who believe that the American dream must be available to all, especially those selected for mistreatment. In the name of that dream, through the history of our country, selected for mistreatment. Over the years and currently, the truths we speak often lead us into conflict with each other. Some of us at UUCHV can recall a tough part of our recent history when we experienced deep conflict. That conflict included the departure of our past minister. That conflict was certainly not just about the minister. It included a fissure between groups of our members. Loyalties became divided and trust and respect was damaged. As part of the healing, Sherry Brown and I and Michael McCurry brought to our congregation a program that we called Circle Back, Healing Through Dialogue, Not Debate. The program allowed some of us who felt misheard or not heard to speak. Others signed up for the program as listeners. That group agreed with some rules for participation. We called those rules disciplined listening. Not all liked the rules. There was pushback. Sherry, Michael, and I ran the program 4 times for members who wanted to be heard. And by the end, well over half of the congregation had participated. This process was not magic, but it helped us to really hear each other. Through our program and a number of activities, many were able to support each other, to be whole, accepted, worthy individuals. Disciplined listening skills include really listening to the other person, not formulating a response while the speaker finishes talking. Dialogue is not competition. The listener is challenged to only ask questions of clarity. For example, please tell me more about XYZ that you just mentioned. Digging deeper into what that person is trying to say rather than aggressively preparing to respond. Expressing genuine interest in the speaker's statements breeds an environment of respect, of love. The alternative is debate. Well, my mother on her mantle had a row of little statues heralding her son's early success as a public speaker and debater from age 13. But my friends, in our church and often in our society, competitive debating is a clear expression of white supremacy. We need to balance getting at facts with a determination to honor the speaker, to experience truths from their perspectives. With a focus on relationships, deep, trusting, respectful relationships, we can experience truth. Refined and practiced listening skills can address congregational conflict. It can also be one of the keys to understanding how some people experience racism, what life is like being Black in America today. As gentle, loving, moral, and ethical UUs, each of us can come to learn about the everyday pain, humiliation, and suffering that is the carryover from a heritage of being kidnapped and brought to the US as slaves, generations of being lesser than. And by actively listening to Black people, to brown people, to Indigenous and other people of color, we can learn how each of us can play a role in making a land of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for all. In May and June, some of us became aware of a book entitled The Gadfly Papers that had been distributed at a previous General Assembly. Essentially, this book and its supporters rejected the anti-racism commitment of the 8th principle. This conflict was played out in the current General Assembly. Specifically, a supporter of the Gadfly group opposed a strong supporter of the eighth principle for a seat on the board of the UUA Board of Directors. With a celebration, the candidate supporting the eighth principle won by a very large margin. This moment in the history of our faith reminds us that not all UUs support our work. We could attack those who disagree, or we could listen actively, reveal the truth, and live by the truth. A group called Allies for Racial Equity Leadership Collective, they're found at the team at uuare.org, said that the book, the Gadfly Papers, is not only a failed attempt at logical discourse, rife with white fragility, it is a stark reminder that ideas aligned with the alt-right ideology do exist within Unitarian Universalism. It is a clear, premeditated, and callous attempt to further strife within our beloved faith. It has caused and is causing pain to all too many within our UU community. It is a manifestation of white supremacy culture fighting back against the beautiful transformative work that so many of us are doing to confront and dismantle systems of oppression. The call to end white supremacy, to close the gap between the faith we proclaim and the reality of the lived experience of marginalized beloveds, is more crucial and compelling now than ever before. May we be even more resolved to do the demanding and joyful work of justice and restoration as we journey toward more wholeness. I keep talking about joining us, get involved, be with us. How does that translate for you into learning from the experience of others, gaining insight about the tortured and often hidden history of neglect and abuse by white people of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color? How does each of us translate all this into action? You heard from several people today what they're doing. Does any of their work inspire you? If yes, they'd love partners. If what they're doing isn't your thing, that's okay too. Reverend Martin Luther King said, we need to focus ourselves and our resources on the poor, exploited Black communities and especially desperate young men. Well, many of you are already doing that. One person here is working with kids in adoption. Another is teaching kids math. Yet another man from another congregation I met has been working for years raising scholarship money for a historically Black college. All this is anti-racism work. Things you're doing right now could be anti-racism work. We encourage you to find an eighth principle activity that is unique to you, to your talents and your personal concerns. Share this with us. When such activities are tied to developing greater insight into racism, then, and thank you, John Lewis, you are being part of the good trouble, necessary trouble, to make this a more just society. We welcome you. Amen and blessed be.
Each week, we make an offering from the bounty we are blessed to enjoy. We do this in a spirit of love and generosity, aware that we have benefited from those who have gone before us, those who in their turn gave generously. Our offering goes to support the work of love and justice undertaken by this community. For UUCHV, today's offering will also be shared with the Unitarian Universalist Association. Please refer to our e-newsletter or website for more information. For FUSW, today's offering will be shared with the Intergroup Association of Alcoholics Anonymous of New York. You can make your donation via credit card or PayPal using the links provided in the chat or either of our e-newsletters. Please remember to give a little extra to compensate for the 3% surcharge, or if you prefer, you can always mail us a check. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. I invite you to join me in the dedication of the offering. The words are shared on your screen. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith. Now please join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are found in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
A lot has been said here in our church about needing to be an anti-racist church. When are these statements powerful encouragement to embrace necessary change? And when might they be simple political correctness? The only true answer lies within each of us. The UUCHV voted to approve the 8th principle last June 19th. To support the 8th principle, we've shared some of what we have learned. We will continue to delve into the 8th principle and what each of us and our community can do to act for justice. We will evolve an ever-expanding description of ways each of us can contribute to this movement to make this a better, more just and inclusive world. Whether you have been with this congregation a decade or more, or this is your first time visiting, whatever the faith and traditions of your past, whatever your theological stance, whoever you are and whomever you love, whatever your heritage, we welcome you. We welcome you to the ongoing work to make more justice, to accept one another and the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We invite you into this work of our faith and from the 8th principle to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Please join us on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock.
Thank you for joining us this morning.